A very, very good morning still. Oh, good. We haven't lost that much time. Are the doors going to remain open or are we going to close them because it can be a little distracting? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for choosing to kind of listen to this topic. I think you had a choice between two tracks, and so welcome to this one. Hopefully, my aspiration every time I go and speak in any forum, and it's great to have not a very large, overwhelming group, but a reasonably relatable group. My aspiration and ambition anytime I speak to people is, I hope you take away 3 things from this session. 3 things that you can actually take back to your day-to-day work from tomorrow, Thursday. Yeah? Okay, cool, great. All right. By way of introduction, I am no means a learning practitioner. Like you can see on the screen, I'm the CHRO for Accenture in India. I see myself more as a business leader who's a consumer of learning expertise to deliver to business needs. And often most learning professionals that I get to speak with or work with are challenged by being able to demonstrate the business outcome of whatever learning, skilling, interventions they are being asked to deliver. And so therefore, that's kind of really where I'm going to kind of take this conversation forward today. We are making all these investments in our people, but we're not really seeing the business outcomes. And why is that, therefore, a gap? Okay? So before we get started, a show of hands, if I may. Have you been in a learning program or a development program or any skilling in program in the last, at least one, if not more, in the last 12 months? Please raise your hands. Keep it raised if it's been the last 6 months. Excellent. Keep it raised if that has changed the way you have actually worked or your teams have worked afterwards. Okay? The number of hands that stayed up, if you could turn around, you could have seen not too many have stayed up after that. Third question, thank you so much for participating and humoring me on this one. But therein lies the gap. Therein lies the gap between actual investments in skilling and learning and development and real outcomes in work, at work, for the business. And in my view, there are 3 reasons why this gap exists. And tell me if you think of a 4th. The very first one is the fact that most organizations do not really have a strong digital core that connects skills that you assess for at the time of hiring with skills that you pick up through the course of the person's life cycle. They don't necessarily flow as a sequence. You don't know, you've hired a person for A, B, C skills. Have those skills either enhanced in terms of proficiencies? Do you have a robust enough framework for either competencies or skills that then tell you at any point in time how many people do you have with a particular skills and at the level of proficiency you need? And so therefore, if your marketing head has asked you for a person with media skills in, say, I don't know, if you're in the food industry, do you know how many people you have within the organization with those skills or with that industry expertise at the tap of a click of a button on your systems? Do all of us know that? Maybe half, maybe less than half in this room are nodding their heads here. Yeah? And so therefore what happens is people go through learning, they walk out of it with some new skills, they have a certificate. For example, I'm looking to hire people with data analytics background, with specific domain skills. Yeah, you'll get a certificate, but learning doesn't move beyond the certificate. It stays in the certificate. It does not move from the certificate into the business because there is no visibility that most people have as learning professionals, HR professionals, access to information on who has what skills at a point in time in your organization is challenge number 1. Challenge number 2 is often learning and work operate in two separate worlds. You work, you step away, you do learning, you step away, you come back the next day. There's no change in terms of either the expectations that the learner's supervisor has of them from day one, or a different way of working that can then use the skills on day 2. So there is no place for learning to land. You know what I mean? You learn, but you don't know what to do with the skills, so you go back to old ways of working, old skills. The third big gap is what I call an operating model gap. What is your operating model? Do people who get skilled and trained have an opportunity to do a different role? Does that actually happen? Or do your leaders and do your business leaders say, I don't want a person who's trained, I want a person who's experienced, get me so-and-so pink shirted, blue coated, yellow socks, brown pants person. That's what I want. The guy you have cannot wear brown pants. Has to build it. He has skilled, but that's not the same as experience. So that's the operating model question, saying how does learning fit into career movements for your people, role changes, internal movements, how does that really happen? In my view, these are the three, and if there's anyone who has a fourth dimension why it doesn't work, we will pause for questions. I'd love to hear insights from you. So what is our response? In my view, the response is partly in what you see on the screen here, which is what I call the capability continuum or the learning continuum. And where we sit on this learning continuum determines how much real value learning is actually unlocking for the business as well as for the people that are going through, or the learners, if I may call them that. And we are now in a position where we can actually leverage technologies, including some of the more advanced generative AI and agentic AI, to actually help us deliver on this learning continuum. What do I mean by learning continuum? Reactive is stage 1, contextual, stage 2, or a different stage. Third is personalized, a very, very oft abused word. And the fourth one is adaptive or predictive. If I look at this continuum, what does each really mean? Let me give you a few examples. Reactive, right? This is where I told you the example of you have a project leader who needs someone in the marketing space, needs media skills perhaps, or you have someone, you want someone who's a full stack engineer and you don't have that, you bring in someone with database skills and then you add those skills to those individuals. That's reacting to a business need and delivering a talent who has the skills perhaps, may not have all the experiences, but that's reactive training. Training based on a business need, reactive. All of us have done this through our careers. That's the first step. Again, real skilling, real learning, but reactive to a business need. The second one is contextualize. What is contextualize? Contextualize is really when you invest people with the skills, but contextualize it for the role that they do, for the function that they are part of, for the career level that they're part of, for their industry that they are in. So what you do in terms of, say, data analytics for a food industry, food distribution versus automobile distribution, very different. And then you contextualize, you take basic data analytics skills and you overlay that with examples and scenarios and case studies and what have you in the context of that particular industry. Or what you do for HR versus someone who is migrating into cloud. The whole system is getting migrated into cloud. The data analytics requirements are very different by domain or function. Or for a CHRO versus an entry-level HR partner. Data analytics look very different. What I need insights on, very different. So again, contextualizing it based on role, based on domain, based on function, etc., is very critical because then it becomes more relevant immediately in terms of what you do, and therefore learning happens. There's more receptivity to learning and adapting that learning into your day-to-day. That's contextualized. Personalized. It is a word that we often throw about very loosely. It is about saying we'll curate the program for you and so on and so forth. It's a little different from that. Personalization is really understanding the persona of the learner, understanding where they are, what their skills are, where do they want to go, what your aspirations are, how do they learn. Some people learn because based on first principles, some people learn by just throwing them into the deep end of examples and exercises, dirtying their hands and figuring it out. So there are different personas, right? And therefore, personalization is about how you not just curate content, but how do you sequence that content? How do you bake in assessments and quizzes and learning competitions, perhaps based on the learner profile? And that's where, again, another great example of where you can use agentic AI to help you. We've tried that within my organization. We call it a learning tutor agent, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It doesn't just point you to the content. It helps design the right quizzes and assessments at the point in time, and based on where you are, it recommends where can you go next, learn that, apply that, come back and take a test. It assesses for your level of understanding and then recommends what's next. But the real cool evolution of learning is this whole adaptive and predictive kind of learning. That's the fourth element of the learning continuum, in my view. A lot of people raised hands here when I said taking a program in 12 months. They kept them up and they said 6 months. I don't know if it was the same program or a different program, but completely different content, or if it was a continuum, because that's reality. Technology is evolving so fast and so rapidly, you've got to constantly keep yourself upgraded, because by the time you finish learning and adapting, applying it, it's already become old. Right? Even if you just look at the number of versions you have on just ChatGPT, right? By the time you figure out one, the next version or the version after that is already available for one. So it's not static. Learning cannot be static. It has to be real time. Learning agents have to now assess, are you really engaged? Are you progressing at the pace that you're supposed to progress based on what your current level is on that particular program? We put an agent called GenPal here within Accenture. What it really does is it monitors the space at which you're progressing, assesses for whether the modality of the training is working for you, comes back with recommendation, adjusts the difficulty level. If you're struggling, it lowers it. If you're doing well, it challenges you, pushes you to a harder level of difficulty on that particular skill. Again, all of this, it's a little bit of a build-up on the personalized learning model that I spoke about, but it's a lot more detailing in the sense of assessing and understanding, baking in your preferences, even a lot more, and responding and helping you build complexity and build skills. But across this learning continuum, if there's one thing that I would strongly urge everybody to consider, whether it's reactive or contextualized or personalized or adaptive, it has to be designed in the flow of work. Learning is not an event that you go to and come back. Learning has to be integrated into your way of working, not as separate from work. You don't go train yourself and come back. You've got to learn in the job, apply, go back to learn, apply, go back to learn, apply. That is when learning happens. We released a research called Learning Reinvented 2025. If you take a look at it, it's available publicly. That was in the context of co-learning with technology. So how do you learn along with your AI agent? But even if you put that aside, one of the key highlights from that research was when you learn in the flow of work, skilling happens 4 times faster. It's not incremental, 4 times faster. And this is based on data from across 20 countries and about 12,000 learners, if I'm not mistaken. That's my buzzer, almost there. So that is going to be critical for you to be able to actually deliver people who have the right relevant skills that is learned and absorbed and applicable in the context of your business. So if I bring it all together for you, in my view, I think, you have a gap. You have a gap between skilling and business outcomes, and that's primarily driven because of lack of visibility, because there's no integrated way of capturing all the learning information on a particular person. 2, there is no work-learn fusion, and so therefore people actually don't really use what they learn in the flow, in the work that they go back to on day 2 or day 3 or even day 6 months, really. And so that's the second element. And the third element is what I refer to as deployment velocity. How quickly are you able to meet your business needs with talent from within that you have grown leveraging your learning assets and deployment, because that is true business value. If you can demonstrate that based on my learning, I've been able to kind of staff and give you people who have the right skills in a much shorter time than getting that talent from outside, integrating them, onboarding them, making sure they're culturally aligned with you, that is immediate ROI in a way that we've never looked at ROI for learning. Business, quickly, deployment velocity. We all have different ways of measuring it, but that is something I would encourage you to look at. And the second big value, in my view, is truly delivers to the career value proposition of the people in your organization. Imagine the power of saying, you've joined us, we will make investment in you to build the skills you need to achieve the aspirations that you have to grow within the organization. So it's a win-win for the firm or the organization. It's a win-win for your people. I don't see why we would not consider using learning as a strategic imperative to actually build the capabilities from within and deliver to the business outcomes. So that's really my capability continuum leading to a deployment of talent, and that's what I meant by skilling to deployment velocity. But I'm going to pause to see if you have any questions, feedback, comments, anything that you'd like us to consider as we continue to shape this. Yes, please. I have a hand here, so whoever is managing the mics, please.
Hello. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Lakshmi. That was really wonderful. I just wanted to understand. I'm Shantini. I head HR Admin IT at Spring. We are a Shell Group company in the renewables. And I have one quick question. When you say that learning is in the flow of work, you have to take up learning, and that is where it is 4 times more effective. May I know a little bit on that? Because that was really something which I catched. And I think that is really helpful when you build the succession plan in place, which you've just mentioned, that for the business, you get the talent in line. And we have had built that along with career progression. And I mean, that is where we have drawn quite a few lines in line of strategic learning. And we have built the ROI around that. So may I know how would you like to explain learning in the flow of work? Is that something with regards to succession plan, or it's on the competency building, or it's choosing a different learning pathway altogether?
Thank you for that. Thank you for the question, firstly. But I meant it more in terms of succession planning is also a great outcome. You can call it succession planning, you can call it deployment velocity, depending on what your organization is really measuring and tracking and requires. But the intent of the work-learn fusion concept is really about how does learning stick? Learning sticks when you get to use that and apply that in the context of your work. Now, if you do that as a separate event from learning, then the relevance, the distance between skilling and applicability, the further away it is, the stickiness of that learning, the ability for that learning to really become something that changes how you work or changes on what you want to work on. That is the importance of a work-learn fusion. That's when skilling happens. That's when that can either lead to the individual moving on to a different role, or it can be someone who's getting prepared for a different higher up career level as a successor. It's really about ensuring there's stickiness and at a pace that you need, especially given, like I said, those purple unicorns are no longer available in the market. So you've got to really invest internally to kind of create the talent you need to meet the business need. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Yes. You're the timekeeper. I'm happy to stay on for as long as you want me to. I said there was a question there? No. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, Lakshmi. I'm Kajal Katoj, and I'm part of the Accenture.
My team. Go ahead.
Yes. So you spoke about the disconnect in the operating model, where skilling is required, but there's also something that hands-on experience is also required. And in an HRPA role, I think while skilling is necessary, but a lot of our work revolves around a lot of judgmental calls when it comes to handling employees, speaking to them on different aspects. I want to understand how we are able to link that skilling aspect to the judgmental calls that we are taking day in and day out. I mean, in Accenture, every day is a new day with the issues that come in or the situations that come in. So want to understand that more. Like, how are we really linking the skilling aspect to the judgment call that we are eventually making?
Yeah, you're making a judgment call, say, for example, say, I'm just making this up, on a grievance that has come to you, for example. If you're an HR partner, there's an employee who's raised a grievance to you, how do you deal with it? How do you respond to that, as an example? Now, there are courses that are available to you to kind of learn some of the basics of grievance management 101. If you're able to kind of do that and then apply some of the learnings as you speak to the individual, that's about work-life fusion. It's not about going away and getting certified in grievance redressal committee processes in a separate work stream and then coming back and figuring out what that looks like a process. But the actual human interventions of how does one respond to grievances. If you've been to one of the ER courses, if not, please do. But how do I deal with grievances? What are the human elements of that interaction that you need to consider? What are the legal or labor law related elements that you need to consider? So you can then advise and coach, apply your judgment. The judgment is ultimately yours. How do I empower you with the skills that you can then use in real time versus, picking up those skills when you're doing a rewards role? May not be relevant because you can't apply that. If I look at, for example, our own internal AI fluency framework, right? If I was to train people AI in the context of their role, it's making sense. But if I give them deep machine learning curriculum, which they may not necessarily use because their current role is really testing, as an example, and they don't necessarily need to develop the large language models, that learning is of no consequence. It's great on certificate because I've got the certification, but it's not something I'm applying in the course of my job. And therefore, by the time I get to apply that, I've forgotten this, or at least I've not built capability, deep capability, because I've not really tested it out at work. So it's great investment, but the investment, if it's not in the context of the work you're doing, in the moment, in the flow of the work, then it's just investment without necessarily translating into a business outcome metric.
Thank you so very much for that. My heart goes out to the gentleman who raised his voice, and my team
maybe
could
say.
Hi,
just
Lakshmi.
one last question.
Yeah, please.
At the back.
Yeah, hi, Lakshmi.
Yes, hi.
I relate to certain things which I've said. See, I'm from the hospitality industry, and post-COVID, we have really been in a lot of crises in terms of really upskilling the learning curve of individuals. From a brilliant basics point of view, when you look at learning to capabilities to performance, and from performance to business impact, leaders are very impatient. Even if you put a person on a M0, they want the person to be productive in M1 immediately, not even giving 30 days of room to really nurture. So what are some of the brilliant basics which you apply at Accenture?
Fantastic question. We have the exact same problem, and I saw a lot of people nodding their heads. Clearly, it's not a problem just for your industry. It's a universal problem. I want people ready as of yesterday, yeah? For some of the entry talent, I'll give you an example to illustrate how we've gone about this. I don't know if it's relevant for your organization or not, but we have the same problem. We want people to be with the skills, able to kind of solve for our clients because we do consulting work, so therefore, how can he be relevant for the clients from day zero? And what we've done is what we call shift left, very creative, shift left. What does that really mean? It means that even before you join Accenture, you have access to learning resources free of cost. You have access to nano degrees free of cost. All you've got to do is learn and make sure you've achieved a certain level of proficiency. Otherwise, I don't onboard you. It's as simple as that. I can't onboard you. You have to have the skills because most people we hire, they are very smart, intelligent people, but they don't necessarily have the skills they need to do the job that they've been hired for, and we do invest in them. The earlier model used to be they'd come on and get onboarded, and then they would spend about 6 weeks with Accenture and get trained, get assessed, and then staffed onto projects. We don't have that luxury. So you learn while you're still in college. We'll give you the assets, we'll give you the resources. You learn, get assessed, build proficiency, get assessed again if you don't meet the cut, and then you're on board. So that's just one example. I don't know if that helps answer your question about speed to deployment. It's a very, very business critical problem for us, for sure. And I can see a lot of people have a similar challenge. I hope that helps. Thank you. All right, thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to kind of take any inputs and feedback that you may have. I'll be just outside for the next half an hour before I rush back to Bangalore. But thank you so much for being such a lovely audience. Thank you.